Does the act define what is a harmful post or harmful data, or does the government leave that up to, let's say, Instagram to figure out if this is harmful or not? Or is that part of the risk analysis you mentioned earlier?
Okay, so when it comes to, so we've got the two types of harmful, haven't we? We've got the illegal, the stuff that's illegal, which exists in legislation. So you have legislation which tells you what is and is not illegal. I mean, law is always vague and there's always grey areas, but it exists in legislation. In terms of what constitutes harmful but legal, in relation to children and under 18s and protecting under 18-year-olds, the Act does have a list of things that it includes as harmful. So it will include things like, say, for example, some types of, I mean, I'm thinking about hate speech in particular because that's my area of expertise. It will include types of hate speech that are not illegal, but which might be seen as harmful. So the law is quite restrictive in terms of which protected characteristics it covers in hate speech law. It's much, much broader when it looks at what constitutes harmful but legal material in relation to children. So an example of that would be something like disability. So disability hate speech is not covered in the law, but it is by the Online Safety Act in terms of children. Yeah. So it sort of what it does is it piggybacks off existing illegal material, but kind of extends it slightly to grayer areas. But it includes, it includes things like about self-harm, sexual offences, that, images that may not necessarily be illegal as such, but could be seen as harmful. So it's a slightly wider category of material than under the legal category.
For the people who are saying it's threading on the line of censorship, do you agree, disagree with them, or do you have a different approach than people who think this is censorship?
Censorship. I have real sympathy for people who worry about censorship, and I think we need to be very careful. We absolutely do need to be careful, and I think we need to hold Ofcom. So one thing I didn't mention earlier was to say that the Online Safety Act is going to be overseen by a regulator, and the regulator is Ofcom, which also regulates traditional media, but it now also regulates social media. So I think it's really important that we hold Ofcom to account, that we check the decisions that they're making, and that we, both as academics, as civil society, individuals, are interested in what they do and make sure that they don't overstep their limits. But I suppose I'd go back to what I said earlier about this kind of shift in the way the power structures operate in society. Traditionally, we might think of the government being the one that we should be scared of, but actually we now have these social media companies that have this huge power over us. So yes, we do have to be careful that this doesn't turn into government censorship, but without this level of intervention, we have the social media companies doing what they want. So it is a dilemma for us as liberals. So I appreciate that, and I do understand why people are upset and worried about it. But I think this is about trying to adapt to a new reality.
Do you think that because there's so much gray in the law, and you do this or you do that, or you could do this, you could do that, that creating a red line would actually be better for the act and better for people and better for the companies to understand that this can be done, but this cannot be done?
So you mean in terms of, I mean, I'm a lawyer, so the idea that there's a red line or that there's a clear line about what is and isn't legal just is not true. I mean, so that would be great, but if that were the case, we'd never need any lawyers, would we? Because we would be able to make things really clear. So I don't think that would be possible. It's language is messy, life is messy, and this is the compromise. This is what we have to go with. We're going to have to go with something where it's not clear, and there are going to be some grey areas, and there are going to be some areas that we are going to argue about and disagree about, and controversies and so on. But that's normal. That's the same with any law. Any law that's created is never entirely clear. That's why we have courts. That's why people argue with each other and go to court. That's just the reality.